Hello and welcome back to an episode of Generation Films. My name is American Ben, and The Fifth Element is a damn good film. I have wanted to do a video on this movie for so long now. This is the type of film that I long for, that just doesn't exist anymore. It's a futuristic sci-fi action film with a colorful world, incredible imagination, fantastic characters, and is just so much fun. It's fun aside though, after rewatching the movie, much to my surprise, I actually have something to say about its themes. Now, I'm not going to pretend that this movie was all that deep or that its story was infinitely complex. That'd be a hard argument to put forth. This is a 90s movie after all, and what's more, it's a 90s sci-fi action movie starring Bruce Willis, which means it's going to err on the side of fun and awesome, and isn't going to spend too much time layering complex messages into its story. Nonetheless, its narrative isn't as shallow as I had remembered it. Actually, it has a coherent theme that undergirds its entire universe. But first, as a refresher, The Fifth Element tells the story of these aliens known as the Mondoshaewans who hold in their arsenal a super weapon capable of destroying an omnipotent cosmic force known as the Great Evil. Basically a giant fireball. However, while the Mondoshaewans are en route to Earth to deliver this weapon to humans for use against the Great Evil, they get ambushed and their ship is destroyed by another alien race known as the Mangalores, who were hired to pull off the hit by Earth-based industrialist Jean-Baptiste Emmanuel Zorg, who himself is working for the Great Evil. Zorg seeks to obtain the Mondoshaewans' ultimate weapon, which is comprised of 4 stones, each representative of one of the classical elements: earth, water, fire, and air, along with another mysterious element, hence the 5th one, which takes the form of a zombie-killing Ukrainian woman who takes on the name of Lilu. This 5th element is the trigger which sets off the 4 stones and thus fires the weapon. Lilu serendipitously ends up in the care of taxi driver and former Special Forces operative Corbin Dallas, and together, along with an astrophysicist priest named Vito Cornelius, the Mondoshaewans' Earth-based contact, they attempt to stop Zorg from obtaining the various elements of the ultimate weapon and aiding the Great Evil in its quest to destroy all life, and somehow along the way, Chris Tucker is the best part of it all. Again, sounds like some good classic over-the-top sci-fi fun, right? Well, let's take a closer look at the movie's subtext. There is a dynamic in play in the film between good and evil, life and death, and destruction and creation.
The goal of this thing is not to fight over money or power, but to exterminate life, all forms of life.
When the Great Evil appears in Earth's orbit and Earth's government begins to mull over how to respond, Vito Cornelius says to Federated Territories President Lindbergh of this giant hellborn fireball that,
"Wherever there is life, it brings death. Because it is evil, absolute evil."
So the universe in The Fifth Element has 2 extant metaphysical forces, evil and good. Evil destroys, good creates. Evil applied upon evil only creates more evil. Perhaps an example of this would be waging war, which, no matter how justified, will only cause more war, death, and destruction, as the business of war creates a need for war machines, which leads to companies that make war machines, which then demand more war to reap profits from. The Great Evil is a force of absolute evil contained in a ball. Thus, applying evil to it in the form of missiles in this case will only serve to energize it.
Evil begets evil, Mr. President. Shooting will only make it stronger.
And alternatively, the Great Evil's very emergence onto the scene becomes a catalyst for nefarious acts on Earth to empower themselves. We can imagine that in a state of fear, Earth's leaders would call for powerfully destructive weapons to be produced and used. On the other hand, we can assume that good begets more good. Good forces in the universe believe that the ultimate good is protecting and creating life.
Your theory is interesting, Father, but we don't have time to go into that right now.
Time is of no importance, Mr. President. Only life is important.
Thus enter the Mondoshaewans and their ultimate weapon, the only weapon capable of defeating the force of evil.
4 elements gathered around a 5th, the ultimate warrior, created to protect life. Together they produce what the ancients called the light of creation, able to bring life to the farthest reaches of the universe.
And in some way, this so-called weapon counteracts destructive forces of evil and replaces them with life via the light of creation you just heard described by Cornelius. Now, if you're astute at this point, you may be saying to yourself, wait a second, this all sounds a bit too simplistic. I mean, okay, so the only thing that matters to the forces of good, supposedly, is life. But don't you sometimes need to destroy in order to protect life? I mean, sometimes war protects other nefarious forces from destroying good ones, right? Even the ultimate weapon itself kind of destroys things, no? And you're right. Now, I don't want to get too deep into a debate about prime movership and how first movements might have led us to the point in which we have to create destructive forces to counter existing ones. And how, had we gone down a different path from first action in the universe, a purer path if you will, then we actually could subsist on only positive forces. Let's put that to the side, because I think honestly it's a deeper dive than we need to make in today's video, and plus it deserves a long exploration. However, that's not to say we don't want to get a little deep here. It's just we're looking for shovels, not James Cameron deep sea submersibles. Anyway, the film does take time out to confront some of its own contradictions. When Cornelius goes to visit, is forced to visit Zorg, he tells him,
"What's wrong with me?
I tried to save life. But you only seem to want to destroy it."
The priest sees the world in black and white. There is good and bad. He's good, Zorg is bad. He helps people, Zorg hurts them. He protects life, Zorg kills people, and also aliens. Though to be fair, Zorg didn't exactly tell the Mangalores to press the red button. I feel like that's more on them than some people like to admit. Anyway, Zorg tells Cornelius,
Oh, Father, you're so wrong.
And rejoins his smear with a calm but sweetly psychopathic rationale for his actions.
Life, which you so nobly serve, comes from destruction, disorder, and chaos. Now take this empty glass. Here it is, peaceful, serene, boring.
He explains that destruction itself can create life. He agrees that there are two forces in the universe, a destructive one and a creative one. But as opposed to the priest, he prefers to take the destructive route.
But if it is destroyed, look at all these little things. So busy now. Notice how each one is useful.
Now, certainly we can also see this explanation here as a criticism of the workings of capitalism. Capitalism creates markets for any demand, ethical or not. If war is in demand, then it creates products to help fight war, and then works to perpetuate and structure society around war in order to thrive. On the other side of the argument, we might put forth that ultimately what capitalism does is drive production and progress via competition. And so no matter what, it will ensure that overall society is strong. These ideas about capitalism do seem to be inherent in the movie, but this type of theme is inherent to a lot of movies. I'm more interested in Zorg's ideas related to creation and destruction.
You see, Father, by creating a little destruction,
A cherry.
I'm in fact encouraging life. In reality, you and I are in the same business.
You can see here that he actually has a more nuanced philosophy on the creation and destruction of life than the priest does. He thinks rightly that both forces work to create life. When it comes to destruction, the extinction of the dinosaurs paved the way for the rise of man. Wiping out a population across the entirety of a territory can lead to new life finding room to flourish. Just as a basic principle of physics, destruction can create life in many ways. The shockwaves given off by supernovas, stellar explosions, can trigger the formation of new stars. So it's just not true that forces designed to create are the only ones that can produce life. Well, what's actually true is that all forces work in conjunction with each other to create and destroy and create and so on. The physics of the universe exist in balance, and yes, I just scienced your face. And this debate runs somewhat implicit throughout the movie, all the while its characters take positions on one side of the fence or the other. A character like Corbin Dallas, a former Special Forces soldier in the Federated Army, is more in the middle. He knows that both creative and destructive forces are needed to survive, and more broadly for humanity to persist. Thus, he uses destructive force to protect creative force. If he didn't, then other destructive forces would destroy creative force. Cornelius himself is a little bit uninsightful. As we showed before, he attempts to persuade President Lindbergh not to fire weapons at the great evil.
Time is of no importance, Mr. President. Only life is important.
But are armies just supposed to stand down and allow themselves to be attacked when evil approaches? And why is the weapon that he wants to use, the Mondoshawan one, so quote-unquote good? As we discussed before, it's still a weapon that destroys, whether we want to admit it or not. At the end of the movie, it turns the great evil into a sort of dead moon in Earth's orbit. It de-energizes the fireball. It puts its flames out. I'm not really sure how it cultivated new life there in a way that destructive forces don't. So what's the real difference between this weapon and, say, a bunch of missiles? Less debris? No explosion? Is that it? As we said before though, the film does seem to highlight Cornelius' slight contradictory philosophy. When Zorg begins to choke, the priest, after holding out for a minute, smacks him on the back, thus launching the stuck morsel free from his airway. He might have saved Zorg's life, an action that the priest probably feels is in line with his modus operandi of protecting life, all life, regardless of what that life is or what it has done. However, by protecting Zorg's life, does he not then allow Zorg to live on and take away life from other people? I mean, the guy is literally working with an omnipotent force of evil that aims to eliminate all life. I'm sure the filmmakers included this moment in the film in order to make us question this, to make us ask, whoa, dude, why did you save him? Was saving Zorg's life really a life-saving action in the grand scheme of things? It's a tough question to answer. A few minutes ago, I speculated that Dallas actually has a pretty good grip on the workings of the destructive and creative forces in the universe, in a street-smart kind of way. He gets how they come together to balance everything. When Lilu, the pure creative force, learns of humanity's history of destruction, she begins to despair and give up on mankind. This leads to her refusal to trigger the ultimate weapon at the end of the movie.
But listen to me, if you don't do something right now, we're all gonna die. You understand?
What's the use of saving life when you see what you do with it?
However, Dallas responds not by denying that humans have blood on their hands, that they have a long history of destruction, but by adding instead that they're responsible for many positive things as well.
Lilu, you're right, but there are some things, very nice things worth saving, some beautiful things. Beautiful things.
In a way, as a former soldier, Dallas is a destructive force. He is a weapon. And how fitting that in the end, he is the one who convinces Lilu to trigger the weapon and save Earth by telling her that he loves her.
Because I love you.
Once again, a destructive force and a creative force come together through a neutral force, love, to save life and by extension produce life, as life that persists can thus reproduce. A mindless watch through of The Fifth Element might hit just the right spot on a lazy Saturday morning. But watching so carelessly also might leave you believing that the film conveyed a simple message that creative forces are good and destructive forces are bad. However, that does not appear to me to be the movie's conclusion. Rather, it seems to say that both forces are needed for life to persist. Still simple, but a bit more insightful and substantial. Anyways, that's the video. Had a lot of fun doing this one. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please do give it a big thumbs up. Can't wait to see your comments down below, so get in there. Subscribe to this channel if you're not subscribed to us by now. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss a damn thing. For now, my name is American Ben. I'll catch you next time. Generation Films, peace.